Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com, and this is Rights 101. Just kind of explaining a lot of the ways people think about rights and some of the existing philosophy around rights. Now, again, what is a right? What isn't a right? Why does it matter? One, it matters because what is a right oftentimes is what people feel government should protect. So basically, government needs to make sure that you have whatever is determined to be a right. But there's other psychological effects as well, in the sense that generally when something is a right, you feel entitled to it, versus when something is not a right, that means it's a privilege. So basically it's for example, eating a burger at McDonald's is a privilege, I don't have a right to eat a McDonald's burger. Then people are of the mindset that they need to earn it and work towards it and aim to do things in their life so that way they can have as many privileges as possible. So oftentimes when you call something a right, people do kind of sometimes take it for granted, and vice versa. When something is a privilege, they don't take it for granted because it's not assumed that they are meant to have it, so they're going to work towards it. It's just a psychological difference. There is a rhetorical difference. So there is an issue with just calling anything a right. But what is a right then? Now, from a philosophical framework, generally, if you take a look at the work of an Isaiah Berlin, rights fall into one of two categories. They're either a positive or a negative right. So if we call something a right, but it's something that is inherently something you can do, and by doing it, it imposes no positive obligation on anyone else, then that's a negative right. So, for example, the right to speak. So I can just talk. It doesn't require anybody else to do anything for me to talk. I can talk. People don't have to listen. People don't have to acknowledge me. People don't have to do anything. I have the right to free speech. So thus the right to free speech is a negative right. So by protecting negative rights, I'm imposing no obligation on anybody else. Things like that. Okay, so basically, I think that's probably the best example. The right to your body would be another example. So I can use my body, I can wave my arms, right to free exchange. Okay, me exchanging freely with other people doesn't obligate anyone to do anything. I'm just exchanging with somebody else that I want to exchange with, and the terms are between us. So these are things that are inherent in sort of us being an individual with autonomy, and this is why libertarians tend to lean towards, the only time we call anything a right is if it's a negative right. One, because you kind of already have it, so that whole idea that you need to kind of work towards it or whatnot, less important, but also practically, we don't believe in imposing obligations on others. Now, a positive right is a right that does, so if we call anything a right, so let's say we say you have a right to health care, well, that means their obligations have to be imposed on others. So basically, to make sure that you have health care, so that means, as a right, that means other people have to be responsible for providing it for you. So that could mean taxing them to pay for it. But what if you have all the tax money in the world, but you don't have enough doctors? Well, then you may have to force people to be doctors, okay? Because there's not enough doctors. So it creates this sort of interesting sort of subservience. The idea is that you're going to force other people to provide people with this thing because you want to call it a right. You want to say they're entitled to it, but there's a scarcity of it. There's an actual, resource constraint. So that requires you to compel the labor, the time, the wealth of others to provide this thing to the level that you can call it a right. So that's why kind of a lot of libertarians have issues with calling things like healthcare, education a right. Doesn't mean we don't think people should have healthcare or education, because it's a privilege worth having that benefits not just yourself but others. There's positive externalities in it. Cool. And some anecdotal things to think about is I always just take a look at the difference between how students kind of operate through K through 12. A lot of times a lot of kids take their education for granted, K through 12, because it's kind of assumed that you're going to have it. You feel like kind of entitled to it. Like, this is just what you do. This is not something that's special, not something that you earned. But when you go to college, a lot of people will take their education a lot more seriously. Maybe not seriously as ideal, but still probably a lot more seriously than they took their K through 12 education, because it's no longer something they're just kind of entitled to do, that they have to do. That's just kind of something that's just there, that they're going to have no matter what. It's oftentimes something you have to take some steps to earn and make some sacrifice to attain. It's a privilege to get a college education. So people treat it differently. People work harder, they get more from it. And it's not only just affect the way you think about it, but also affects what you get out of it. You end up getting a lot more out of it because you work towards a lot about it. So same thing with sort of healthcare, in a sense. So if people realize that they're not entitled to good health, because healthcare is a means to an end. The real thing that people want, the privilege people want, is good health, and that's something you have to earn through your diet choices, your health choices. There's a lot of things that are in your control, and of course some things that are out of your control that are going to affect your health. But you aim to, insulate as much of the things you can't control and maximize the use of the things you can control to get the best health possible. And that's going to affect your health care costs and needs and demands. But if you feel like healthcare is a right and you are entitled to it, and again, I'm not talking about whether people should have healthcare. I think people should. People should be able to get care. Again, how do you make that happen? It's a different question. Again, people make different choices. And we can get into sort of the rabbit hole of, how do people deal with this? Then what happens that because when you call something a right, it affects the psychological aspect of it, and government's sort of managing the cost of it, they end up getting more and more into regulating your day-to-day sort of behavioral stuff, whether you can smoke, whether you can eat unhealthy foods, things like this, because now they have a cost that they have to deal with, and you're less likely to make psychologically a better choice because cognitively the distinction between privilege and right has been distorted. So that's some sort of the more consequential reasons for why the right versus privilege distinction matters. But also people like to debate where rights come from. Are rights, there's the idea of like deontological rights, where there's like certain things are rights and they're absolute rights and they're given to you either by just sort of the nature of you being an individual and it's just inherent, or by like a higher power. And there's people who look at rights from a utilitarian level in the sense that a good rights framework is going to make people live together better. And that's the value of a rights framework, of basically making society work better, because rights really don't matter if you're one person. Like if you're a person on an island, property rights doesn't matter, because the only reason you care about, okay, this is a right, this is a privilege, is because you have to interact with other people and there might be disagreements about a dispute, and you need sort of a framework of thinking about how society works and what society's obligations and what's not their obligation in order to think through those disputes. So that's why a rights framework is important, why all these things are important because of society. So utilitarian would focus mainly on, does this framework achieve what I think is sort of the ideal of this? While someone who's more of a deontological natural rights kind of person is like, this is the way it works, period. This is the rights framework. Consequences don't matter because this is morally right. And you can come to a libertarian sort of thinking of rights in either way. But these are just sort of the different ways people think about these things. So hopefully you found this informative and thoughtful and stuff. My name is Alex Merced. Go to alexmerced.com, learn more, have a great day, and enjoy.